I'm going to go over the mix for my track Baptised in a Burger King. I'm going to go over the drums first. So the drums are coming from a drum sampler. All the individual drum sounds are sent to their own output on the mixer desk, which means I can process them individually with their own EQ and compression settings. The kick, snare and toms are routed to a drum bus, which is routed to parallel compression as well, and then the cymbals are routed to their own cymbal bus, which just has an EQ on it. I'm going to go over the kick first. So the kick on its own sounds like this, with effects from the drum bus. Without any effects, sounds like this. So I'm using EQ to boost the fundamental frequency to make the kick a bit more thumpier, make it punch through the mix a bit more, removing unnecessary low end so that the thump of the kick will really translate and be through on a sub and be really powerful, getting rid of a lot of the clickiness in the high end because it became quite harsh. Then using a transient shaper to boost the attack, which makes it punch through the mix a lot more. So that sounds like this. Sounds a lot better. Then I've got the snare. I've got a transient shaper on it, which without sounds like this. With a transient shaper. So boosting the attack, making it really punch through the mix. Boosting the sustain to bring out the ring. The tail of the snare, which is a key part of my drum mix, is a very key component to hardcore snares, is having the tail of the snare in the mix. And then I've got a compressor just to boost the attack even more, and then to saturate the sound as well. I'm adding quite a lot of gain, and I'm squashing the dynamics quite a bit, but with an attack where the transient actually comes through, so it's retaining the punchiness. Then I'm getting rid of unnecessary low end, boosting the fundamental frequency to make it punch through the mix, getting rid of some boxy frequencies, and then boosting the high end at 1K and 6.3K to add more presence to the snare. Then overdrive plugin to add some upper harmonics into the signal, and that makes it come through the mix a lot more, especially on smaller speakers. Gonna go over the toms. Gonna find a part of the drum MIDI that has toms in it. So transient shaper, boost the attack, make it sound like the toms are being hit really hard. Makes it sound a lot more aggressive, makes it punch through the mix. Then I've got a compressor. Got quite high compression settings, and then exaggerating the click with the attack ratio, the attack and the ratio. I like the saturation that this puts on the sound as well. EQing, so removing a lot of unnecessary mud in the signal to make sure that the mix don't get muddy. Removing a lot of the 160 Hz area where the transient was. This is to make sure that it didn't linger in this area, which muddied up the mix, so I'm just doing this to make the toms sit better in the mix. Getting rid of some room frequencies. I didn't like the sound, it's sounding quite harsh, so get rid of that, and then boosting the high end to make it poke through the mix a bit more. Got some saturation on there as well to add some upper harmonics into the signal. Really thickens up the sound. Transient shaper with a lot of attack and sustain on 47%. Again, just making it more present in the mix, and also exaggerating the attack, which makes it sound super heavy and aggressive. So then I've got a compressor with similar settings again, adding saturation and also exaggerating the attack, and it's controlling the dynamics slightly as well. well, quite a lot because of the high ratio. Then I've got this EQ, removing everything below the fundamental because it's not necessary, removing some secondary harmonics in the sound which sounded quite nasty, getting rid of this area to prevent build up, getting rid of some of the room sound, boosting the high end to make it come through the mix a bit more. Then saturating that to make the whole sound come through the mix a lot more, which the saturation really helps when you've got 5 guitars in the mix. It really helps the drums to have their own space, and it helps the drums to punch through as well. All my cymbals are routed to this cymbal bus, and I'm just removing some harsh frequencies at 1.7k, 3.5k, 6.5k, and then I've got this dynamic EQ, which that's there to attenuate some of the harsh frequencies in the hi-hat. So this doesn't start to EQ when other cymbals play, like the crash. It only starts to play when the resonant frequencies in the hi-hat are really apparent, which helps me to remove harsh frequencies in the hi-hat without affecting the other cymbals, which means that I can just use this one EQ for all the cymbals. So for the drum bus, I have distortion. I've got the drive set quite low, but it is adding quite a bit of saturation just because of the input level going into the distortion. And then I've got this dynamic dial that retains the transient. So rather than using a hard clip plugin, which would just completely annihilate the transient, this saturates the plugin but maintains the dynamics, which is super useful because I can get a lot more drive and saturation out the sound without completely destroying the attack that I wanted, which I exaggerated with the transient shaper and all the other plugins and all the other drum sounds. Then compressor again, gluing all the sounds together. It makes it sound more cohesive as a drum mix when I have this compressor on the drum bus. Then I'm removing unnecessary low end below 33 Hertz, getting rid of all our muddiness. Then I'm removing a bit of the room sound at 900 Hertz. That's then being sent to parallel compression. I'm really slamming the compressor. May not loop that. So adding a lot of input gain, quite a lot of output gain. It's an analog style compressor, so it's imposing a lot of saturation on the sound as well. And that really, having this in parallel really thickens up the drum sound and makes it punch through the mix a lot more. Adds a lot more weight. And that's really apparent in my reference track. So this has allowed me to capture that drum mix of the Not Loose album. Then I'm using this clip distortion plugin. So that's just really saturating the parallel compression bus, which it just makes it super tight and super aggressive. Then the snare also has its own reverb. That's to exaggerate the tail as well, the sustain, which was a key part of the reference track and a lot of hardcore music. So the decay is at about 1.5 seconds, and then it's all wet because it's on a bus, and then it's quite a small room size. I'm going to go over the guitars in the mix. So I'm going to go over the left rhythm and the right rhythm. So the guitars were recorded directly into the interface, so some of the mixing was done before it was even recorded. So the signal chain was a noise gate into a pitch shifter into a Boss HM2, which I was using as a boost. Then that was going into a Boss Metal Zone, which I was utilizing as like an amplifier, like a preamp. And the EQ was quite intuitive. You can get a lot of sounds out of it, which was how I was able to use it in that way. Then that was going into a noise gate again to eliminate all the noise that was created from using 2 distortion pedals stacked together. And then that was going into a cab IR pedal with an EQ. So I did some EQ in, and I used vintage 30 speakers and greenback speakers to get that sound. So I did some EQing on the guitar tone, removing some build up at 180 hertz and 250 hertz, which muddied up the mix. So I just did that to prevent mud in the mix. Removing unnecessary frequencies below 80 hertz, again making sure that the mix doesn't get muddy. Removing some nasally harsh frequencies at 900 hertz, and then removing some really harsh high-end frequencies at 5k. Then everything above 25k isn't necessary, so just getting rid of it. So the frequencies are getting rid of, the build up here. Then that guitar, the left guitar, is being sent to a mono reverb, which is being panned to the right. The right guitar is being sent to a mono reverb, which is panned to the left. So the reverb is in mono, which is crucial for this trick. It's a stereo enhancing trick. It adds more space and depth to the guitar sound. So both of these have the same settings, and I'll do a with and without. So this was purely done to add more width to the guitar sound, to make them sound a lot fuller and a lot wider. It really helps them to sound more aggressive, which definitely fits this style of music. So without sounds like this. With. So there's a massive difference to the sensor space and the stereo width. I'm going to go over the left and the right guitar tones. So the signal chain for these guitar tones was the HM2 pedal going into a noise gate, going straight into the interface, and then I processed that in bias effects so that I could use different amps with the HM2 pedal. So I didn't end up using the CQ because it wasn't necessary. And then so it's the HM2 going into this Randall Satan. The gain's on 11. really saturating the guitar tone. Adding a bit more treble, adding a lot more presence to exaggerate the high end, make it poke through the mix a bit more. Then I've got a C414 mic on the cab. I used this over the SM57, which was the other option, because I thought the SM57 was quite harsh, especially with the amount of high end in the guitar signal. This mic really smoothed out the guitar sound, which I quite liked. And then getting rid of some harsh frequencies at 800, getting rid of unnecessary low end at 100 hertz, then EQing, getting rid of some harsh frequencies at 8k, exaggerating the mid scoop by getting rid of some of the 500 hertz region, which that's definitely a key part of this guitar sound, and the guitar sound of death metal in any hardcore genres in general. And then getting rid of some unnecessary low end again, and that helps the guitar sound better in a mix with the EQ. The right double for what I was using for that was this preset. Let me load it up. For the right double, I was using this preset. So HM2 into this drive pedal. So I was boosting the level a little bit to tighten up the guitar sound in front of the amp. It really exaggerates the chugs, like the heavy palm muted parts of the guitar tone. And then I had this tone set to 2.5-ish, and that just got rid of some of the high end which got harsh, especially when stacked with this amp, and the increased boost. So gain is on 8, boosting the bass to exaggerate the chugs on the palm muted parts, scooping the mids, then boosting the treble and the presence a little bit, just to make it sit better in the mix. Then I'm using an Engel cab, and then I'm using the C414 mic again, because I liked how it smoothed out the harshness in the guitar tone. Then on my EQ, I'm boosting 8K just to get the high end similar in volume to the left guitar tone, so that they were reasonably balanced in the frequency spectrum. And I needed to do that because I was using 2 different cab simps. And then, yeah, just boosting a bit of the high end, boosting 120 hertz, exaggerate the chugs, getting rid of some low end. So I decided to use 2 different cabs in the left and right channel, because having 2 different speakers and having 2 guitar tones that sound different really increases the stereo width, because the left and the right channel are different. So that was done purely for stereo width. I wanted to get the guitar sound as wide as possible, and to create a really, really, really wide mix, because I felt like that would add to the aggressiveness of the song. So then I've got, so I'll play them actually. I'll play them guitar tones. So all the mixing again was done in this plugin before I bounced it out. So then I've got a bass. So it's not actually a bass, I don't own a bass. It's a guitar that's put down an octave. That's going into a 5150 simulator. I used a guitar amp because I wanted to add a lot more grit to the bass, which I couldn't get out of the simulated bass amps in this plugin. So I really had to exaggerate the low end. So bass is on 10. That's to make sure that it retains its low end information, basically. Then getting rid of mids, because it's not necessary, the guitars are in that frequency range. And then boosting the treble and the presence just to make it sit above the guitars in the frequency spectrum. So it sits below the guitars and above the guitars, so it's got its own space in the mix. Then I'm using greenback speakers with an SM57. I like the SM57 for this because I like the high end. It made it sit well in the mix compared to the C414 mic. Using a multiband compressor, so I'll show with and without that. It makes quite a massive difference. So I'm completely getting rid of the mids because I don't want them, because it was taking up the space of where the guitars were, and it was muddying up the mix. Then I'm boosting the highs, boosting the lows, and then it's a really, really, really heavy compression, so it's maintaining the dynamics as well, making it super consistent, which definitely helps with the aggressiveness of the bass. You know, keeping everything the same velocity is crucial. Then I've got this EQ, removing everything below 50 hertz, not necessarily muddying up the mix, boosting the low end 115 hertz so that it has its own space in the mix, and it really punches through the mix a bit more, balancing out the frequency spectrum basically. Then I've got a dip at 2K, getting rid of some harshness, and then getting rid of everything above 9.5K because it's not necessary. Then that's being sent to a sub bass channel. So what I did is I sent this to to a bus with a pitch shifter on it, which is going on octave down, and then I was just isolating the sub. So that added a lot more low end into the sound, which thickened up the bass a lot more, which helped to make it sound a bit more modern. A lot of modern metal mixes have that sub bass in them, so it really helps mix the sound more modern, and it also helps the bass to sit well in the mix below the guitars and with the drums as well. It actually makes it be heard a lot more, so that's why I did that. And then I've got a middle guitar. This guitar's completely in mono. This is just there to thicken the guitar sound up more. So that was using this same preset again. Bass on gain on 10, a bit of high end, removing harsh frequencies. So the middle guitar, completely in mono, removing frequencies above 16K because it's not necessary. And then I've got this compressor. It's got quite subtle settings. It's got no attack, so it's not letting any transient through. it's squashing the sound immediately, and then it's just I've just got this there to control dynamics. I also quite like the saturation that it adds. So this is just there to thicken up the guitar sound even more. So I'll play all the guitars together, including the bass. Then I have these extra guitars. So these are the left double guitar tone and the right double guitar tone. So that's this guitar tone and this guitar tone. They're being sent to their own track so that they can be sent to this reverb bus. So they're getting sent to tracks 31 and 32, which are getting sent to the reverb bus. And then also getting sent through this bus, which is I was utilising for parallel compression, but decided not to. It didn't sound good, so I've removed that from the mixing desk. So it's just that channel into reverb. Reverb I was using to add more space to the guitar sounds, and that really thickens up the mix and the guitars when that section hits. It just keeps the mix interesting throughout the whole track, making sure that it isn't flat and one note completely. There needs to be some variation in the width and the sort of stereo image throughout the track. So these extra guitars are brought in here, here, and here, and then I've got this other final guitar, and that's a center guitar again, but it was for lead parts. So here it's just feedback. It's just feedback there, but it's mainly for this guitar solo. So it's this guitar tone, this one. So I'm just processing this guitar differently. So I'm EQing it and compressing it. So I've got this EQ boosting the high end by 2k, and then boosting the high end at 7.7k. That's just to add more presence to the guitar sound and make it sit better in the mix when the solo hits, make it sit above the other guitars in the mix, puts it more forward in the mix. Then I've got this compressor just taming the dynamics, so there's no attack, so the compressor compresses straight away as soon as there's a signal through it, and then it's quite subtle settings. And then that sounds like this. Then I'm automating the volume. I did have a noise gate on the whilst I was recording the solo, but it wasn't very tight, so it left these tails at the end of the sound. So I wanted to try and get rid of them as much as I could. So that sounds like this, the tails at the end of the sound, and then I'm just using this automation to try and get rid of that. It's not perfect, it doesn't completely get rid of it, but it helps. It makes it less noticeable. Then I'm using creative EQing in this part to basically add a filter sweep before the final drop, and that's adding tension. So what's happening is there's a bandpass filter which is getting automated, so the low part of the bandpass, so the low cut, is getting reduced, so there's more low end towards the drop, and then there's also more high end towards the drop because the high cut's being automated as well, and that just helps to build tension, and then that really helps to make the final riff hit when it does. It also keeps the riff from being boring. It prevents the actual track from getting boring, because there's a lot of playing with the stereo width. There's obviously the solo guitar, and then there's creative EQ in here, so it's just different stuff in the mix to keep it interesting sounding. Then there's just these white noise crackles throughout the whole thing. That was made on the synth. It's just a white noise being automated with volume. It's quite random panning. That was then sent to a ring mod and a distortion plugin to make it sound like a really lo-fi tape radio kind of sound. That was a theme throughout the album, was to have radio static throughout it, so I put radio static throughout my song as well to keep to that theme in. Then I've just got tempo automation. That's everything.